So I'd like to welcome our first speaker up, who's doing some important work in what I would call the business is beautiful for good trap. Businesses often want to do good, but in order to do that, they have to have a good understanding of what their impact on the world is. So let's all welcome up Michelle Lee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to kick off this session today. My name is Michelle, and I'm the founder of Clever Carbon and Women in Climate. And today I'm here to talk to you about a brief history, the carbon footprint edition. Can you give me a slide, please? Right. So I think many of us have heard about carbon a lot, and it's also one of these topics that are being highly prevalent in the media: net zero, energy transition, decarbonization, all those things. But I want to take everyone a step back and a brief look into the history. So next slide, please. We have been on this planet for about 4.5 billion years. Many of you know that stat. That's probably just a jog in the age of the universe. So let's start from the beginning. For most of our time on Earth, the conditions have been highly volatile. Volcanic eruptions, there were some ice ages here as well, mostly uninhabitable, zero oxygen. And let's start with the Precambrian era. During this time, lasted about 4 billion years, the CO2 concentration was around 10,000 parts per million and above. So parts per million is just an expression of concentration. So I guess I should probably step out. There we go. And this represents over 80% of the planet's lifetime. So 10,000 parts per million plus. Then we have the Phanerozoic era. This era was about 15 billion years, and the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere dropped to about 4,000 to 7,000 parts per million. This era marked abundant plant and animal life. Next, we have the Mesozoic era, right? The age of the dinosaurs, marked by early evolution of mammals, evolution of flowering plants, and this lasted 200 million years, and the CO2 concentration then was somewhere between 1,000 to 2,500 parts per million. So we went from 10,000 to now around 1,000 at the bottom. Then we have the Cenozoic era. This is really the age of the mammals. We saw evolution of early humans. This lasted about 50 million years. There was an ice age, and the CO2 concentration then was somewhere between 280 and 1,000 parts per million. Then we entered the Holocene epoch. That's what we're in right now. This started about 12,000 years ago. This time was marked by abundant biodiversity. We had a stable climate and early human civilization. And during this time, the CO2 concentration was 280 parts per million. So we went from 10,000 all the way down to 280. And picture yourself at the start of the Holocene epoch, right? What did the air smell like? What were the sounds that you were hearing? All these different insects, water, like just an amazing time to be on this planet and a stable climate for once. So from then, in 1492, that's when Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. So let's start here. The CO2 concentration was around 280 parts per million then. Next, we have the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. The Industrial Revolution had already begun, and the CO2 concentration was now at 295 parts per million. Then, in 1912, the Titanic sank, and then the CO2 concentration was about 300 parts per million. So we're going up here. Now, in 1960, the Beatles were formed, and when this happened, the CO2 concentration was 315 parts per million. Next, a monumental moment, right? Taylor Swift is born, 1989. The CO2 concentration was already above 350 parts per million, right? So we were at 352 parts per million. And in 2008, that's when the first iPhone was developed. The CO2 concentration was 384 parts per million. Now, the pandemic in 2020, we saw 414 parts per million. And today, we're at 421 parts per million. What can we say our time is marked by? Prevalent energy usage, fossil fuel consumption, the evolution of AI. There's a lot going on during this time. And if we think about the original 280 parts per million, when we were essentially in paradise, there's a little bit of a gap there. So I want to tell you, how do we get back to that 280 parts per million, right? It doesn't actually seem like a big gap, 280 and 421 where we are, but actually to get back to 280 parts per million or even below 300 parts per million, we need to remove a massive amount of CO2 from the atmosphere, and we have very little time to do it. There's huge urgency here. So, from this moment on today, what do we spend our time on? What are we scaling? What are we funding? We need to really think about what we fund in order to get us back to this period, if that's even possible. So, what do we do at Clever Carbon? At Clever Carbon, we teach people about carbon footprint in a way that is really hip and fun, digestible. The coffee menu is one of my favorite examples. So, instead of the price and the calories, you can actually see the CO2 concentration of coffee. And someone who looks at it for the first time might think, coffee is a carbon footprint. I never knew that. Oh, well, why is a cappuccino so much higher than a filter or drink coffee? And you can actually go to our website and download the coffee menu for free. If you have access to your office, you can just put it in a frame and just put it in the kitchen and run away and be like, oh, how did that show up here? It's available in different languages, like 9 or 10 different languages, but we can start really simple and get everyone on board to start understanding how carbon comes into our lives. So we also do work with the NBA. So we're very lucky to call NBA one of our clients. They license our materials to engage with their fans. You have a carbon footprint quiz, and the NBA licenses our quiz, and they have their own branded version of it. You can see this on the Jumbotron at the All-Star game this year. Very proud, because Clever Carbon really started as a side project. I was working in tech. I worked at Salesforce, DocuSign before my life here. And to see what started as a side project now on the Jumbotron was really an incredible moment for me. And the reason why we do the work we do at Clever Carbon is because what gets measured gets changed. So I know I have a couple more minutes here, so let's play a game. Is everyone ready? Yeah? Okay. This is serious stuff, so I don't want anyone to come up to me and be like, Rochelle, you didn't tell me how serious this was afterwards. All right, you have 10 seconds to remember as much as you can on this slide. 10 seconds. All right. So, serious stuff here. So, what does everyone think the average carbon footprint of an apple is? If you remember the potato, you might get this right. Who says A? A, okay. B? Some B's? C? And D? Okay. Well, the answer, a potato is around 40 grams, and an apple is around 35 grams of CO2 emissions. Not all vegetables are created equal. So a tomato, for example, in this study was 130 grams because in the UK, which is where the study is done, tomatoes are grown in greenhouses, which requires more energy. And a bowl of rice, which is 3 tablespoons of rice, is about 330 grams of CO2 emissions because rice production produces methane, which is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Now, what does everyone think about the average carbon footprint of a serving of chicken? See? Yeah? Anyone else? So if you remember pork, you'll get this right because pork is around 1,800 grams, okay? And chicken is around 1,300, right? Now, the average vegetarian meal is about 600 grams, and a serving of beef is 7,700 grams. Now, you all know this answer because you saw the coffee menu at the beginning, right? So what about a dairy latte? Does anyone remember a dairy latte? What do you say? Pretty shy crowd. That's okay. It's early in the morning. I heard a B. And if you said B, you would be correct. It's around 350 grams of CO2 emissions. A plant-based latte is around 140 grams. And if you remember, coffee on its own is really just 50 grams. So the carbon footprint of our coffee doesn't actually come from the coffee itself. If you're having a latte or cappuccino, it really comes from the dairy. And what about an email? Okay, I'm throwing a wrench here at everyone because you were doing food and you were getting good at that. Now I'm going to test you for an email. What's the right thing everyone think the average carbon footprint of an email is? B? Yeah? Okay. So luckily, the average carbon footprint of an email is about 4 grams of CO2 emissions per email. This is a black and white email. As you add additional like attachments, images, HTML related stuff, it's going to get higher. So, you know, the carbon footprint of our data centers and our digital world is quite intense. We don't see it, but it's there for sure. So I was given an extra minute, so here we go. I think, yeah, okay, cool. So last part of the game here, the average annual carbon footprint of someone in Canada is 14.1 tons, okay, 14.1. So what do you think the average carbon footprint is of someone living in the UK? Who says A? A, B, C, D? Okay, so very little people actually say D, which is the answer. And many people are shocked that the carbon footprint of the UK is actually half that of a country like Canada. Now, what about Vietnam? Who says A? B? C? D? Okay. All right. So the carbon footprint of someone in Vietnam is about 2.2 tons. And a fun fact, one flight from New York to Tokyo one way is around 1.8 tons. All right, last one. What do you think the average carbon footprint is of someone living in the US? How many people say A, B, C, D? Okay, I saw a lot of hands go up for B. Luckily, it is not B, it is D, 17 tons. And just to give you a little context, right, a few other countries here, the carbon footprint can really vary between the countries. I didn't get to do my entire presentation here, but hopefully this gives you a sense that, you know, when it comes to carbon literacy, we can learn about the 10,000 parts per million all the way to today, we're at 421 parts per million. And in our daily lives, there's a lot of levers that we can pull to really make more informed decisions. So, Elliot, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here.